Let's talk about the franchisee survey. If I'm correct in my assumption, you're the first franchisor to publicly release the anonymous results of your entire group. Is that correct?
Yes.
I couldn't find any other research about this.
We actually, our own surveys are internal.
Yeah.
We really try to get about 90%. And we ring them, but they're all internal.
Yeah.
One we had done was commissioned by an external body.
Yeah, that's right.
They only got about 30%. So they were slightly more negative. I think they showed about 15% with poor income versus our 9%, because the people who responded were more like those who were negative.
Yeah.
We're the only company in the world that's ever done that, as far as I know. But this is the thing I've said to governments for years when they go on about the franchising code. Their idea is let's have a more and more detailed and legalistic disclosure document. Now, the problem with that is that nobody reads the disclosure document.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And I've asked franchisees at training, I said, has anybody read the entire disclosure document? Not one person puts up their hand. Yeah. So it's basically legalistic garbage. It means nothing. Yeah. What I said in every inquiry, always, what you need to do is to have a official independent body poll every franchisee every year and publicly display the results, and that would do so much for franchising. Not just the fact that the contract is fair, but it is a support good. Yeah, are they nice to you? Would you do it again? Simple questions like that. I got so frustrated, eventually I said, we'll do it ourselves. We'll be an example. We'll put our own stuff out there, because I know perfectly well that if we were compared against any other franchise system, especially in the service area, we would kill them, because our franchisee satisfaction is so much better.
Ladies and gentlemen, great to have Jim Penman, founder and CEO of Jim's Group, on the podcast today. Jim's Group, as we all know, is the largest franchise group in the Southern Hemisphere. Jim, welcome.
Yeah, good to be here.
It's great. Now, look, I've got to ask you, first question, has Daniel Andrews given you a call asking for any of Jim's Group services?
Not that I know of.
Look, you banned him a few days ago, and I saw in the news it said backlash, and I think they had quotes from 2 or 3 people. Have you actually seen any dip in demand as a result of banning Daniel Andrews?
Well, he's not exactly a big client of ours. I don't think he'd probably want to use us anyway. I didn't actually ban him. I just recommended to any franchisee or any independent contractor, considering how badly he's treated you, I encourage you not to provide service. I think it's wonderful, these restaurant owners. I mean, they're sort of hitting back.
Yeah, they certainly are.
Treated people like dirt. He threw 100,000 plus Victorians out of work for no reason at all. No hold to device, nothing. He said 100,000 Victorians plus lose their jobs, or I might look a bit weak or politically not so good. Easy decision. Oh.
So, look, let's assume he's sitting in his stately home or, the Imperial Palace in Beijing, wherever he's domiciled at the moment. He phones up and says, take my money. You wouldn't take his money.
Well, I don't work for people direct. We probably wouldn't even know. It'd just go to the system. All I can say is if any franchisee of mine were to say no to Dudley Andrews, I'd say, good on you. It's about time he got told. It's good to know that the damage he's done to the state and to so many people, that some people are actually fighting back.
Did anything ever come of the legal case that you brought against or you were considering bringing against I think you had a couple of appeals knocked back, if I remember correctly, and then you were considering going again. Did anything ever come of that?
We lost, we appealed, we lost that. Basically, so in that sense, we lost. But in another sense, Barry, we won big, because the whole point that we were making was there was no health reason for shutting down independent contractors. And when the only defense they've got is we say, tell us your reason for doing it. And they say, we don't have to tell you. Now, that is an admission. They had no health cases. Because if they had the health, why wouldn't they give it? Yeah, here's a report from the chief medical officer saying risk of infection is higher as per overseas. Give us the evidence. No evidence. What it does, it was actually very successful, and it proof positive. He had no health reason for doing it. It was pure mercenary politics.
Well, I think globally we're seeing a little bit of a backlash against the decisions that were made at the time. And at the time, I recall I was in Victoria. I managed to escape when the first lockdown finished. But the Victorian government offered I think it was $3,000 or something like that to sole operators. I'm not sure about the chronology, but was your media release, your open letter, was that before they offered the money to sole operators, or did
Well,
the money come
this
first?
was federal money, not state. The state didn't offer anything.
Okay,
It was
okay.
federal money, but it didn't replace their income, nor the sense of purpose you get from, you doing your job. But
Yeah.
we independent operators, we get something out of what we do. We provide a service to the public. We keep their houses clean and their gardens mowed. It's a sense of purpose and meaning in life. Sitting at home waiting for federal government checks, not much of a substitute for that.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to that meaning in life because you spoke about that at the Franchising Expo. But let's just continue that sort of COVID pandemic vein. I was having a look at the numbers for Jim's group on May the 10th, 2018. You had 3,842 franchisees in 50 divisions.
Right.
In August 2021, you had 4,350 in 50 divisions. And now in 2024, your LinkedIn says that you have 5,500 franchisees still in 50 divisions. So the numbers online say that you've remained static in terms of divisions. But franchisees, you've had a 43% increase during that period, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, and, in fact, during the so-called economic downturn, the mini recession we've had. What do you attribute that to? Because if the pandemic was so bad, you as a group have grown exponentially. How do you reconcile that?
Well, the pandemic wasn't particularly bad for us, apart from that 2-month lockdown in Victoria, because it didn't really slow us down at all. Recession isn't particularly bad for a company like mine because we tend to have surplus work. We've knocked back more than 200,000 leads in the past year, and we've actually got so many leads in some divisions. We've been giving that money to the franchisees because we can't spend their advertising budget. So lack of work isn't the problem. So if the economy goes down, we're actually well off. Now, we did have a very strong demand. People couldn't go on holidays, they couldn't go to restaurants, but they could still generally get services done. So we had very strong demand in that time. At one stage, close to a third of our leads were unserviced. Demand was so high, which has dropped off. But as to why we've continued to grow, I do think, strangely enough, the whole controversy over the lockdown did help to raise the profile of the company. And I became known as a spokesperson. And particularly if you look at it, a spokesperson for the people who've been forgotten, the independent contractors. Even a lot of the independents actually thanked me for what I did because we spoke up for them, which nobody else did. The kind of person who's thinking of looking for a business might look at that and say, wow, this is a guy that really stood up for his people when times were tough and even when it wasn't popular. So maybe I'll think about a franchise. I think it has a big impact. A lot of people actually came to franchise training because they heard this story and they read the publicity and they thought this guy really stands up for us, which we do. And the other thing too is that we have a fantastic social media section run by a guy called Joel Kleber, who is just brilliant. And he's very, very good on social media. We've got stuff going out all over the place all the time. I just do things like do answers to TikTok inquiries and get, 20,000 people read them. It's just astonishing. So we have this very strong social media outlet now, which we didn't in the past.
Joel is phenomenal in the industry. I've got a lot of time and respect for Joel and what he's done over that period, the 2018 to 2024 period. Your marketing has actually changed quite dramatically in the sort of 6.5 years. And I think that's certainly thanks to Joel Kleber and also you giving the permission to Joel to do that, but also your transparency in the way you talk and in fact how you become a spokesperson for those who are seeking a little bit of justice. How does that make you feel, Jim? Like people are calling you a bit of a legend online and you've got your haters as well, of course, online.
There's Dan lovers out there still. Somehow, I don't know how or why, but they do.
Yeah. But what does that make you feel? I know you're a man of deep faith and you have a sense of purpose and justice, but when you see people flocking to the brand, maybe, and I would say because of your stance during COVID, how does that make you feel as a person?
It's good. It's kind of embarrassing sometimes. People
Mm.
often come up and thank me and stuff, which is nice. But in a sense, I liked the old days when people didn't know who I was. So people would ask me what my profession was, and I'd say, well, I what my job was, and I'd say, well, I have a business that organizes cleaning and gardening, or something like that. So I would never admit it. And if I wasn't wearing my uniform, they wouldn't know. Or even if I was, they wouldn't know it was me. So I kind of missed that anonymity in a way. But look, it's part of my job. To be honest, I'm not particularly good at doing a lot of things. I'm not a very good manager, or not a very good with the figures, or a whole heap of stuff. Not very good at IT. So speaking out is one of the very few things I can do.
Yeah, I remember, 6 years ago, people online were saying, is there really a Jim? But I think everyone fundamentally knows who Jim is now.
Yeah, well, actually, I went to a wedding the other day, and the father of the bride spoke to me and said, "Oh, what's your job? Are you a lawyer?" That was so he didn't know. So I just told him, "Oh, yeah, I have this cleaning gardening company."
It's funny. I was just reading a book by Eric Idle from Monty Python, and he said the only good thing about fame is you can get a table in restaurants. Do you find that?
Well, Barry, the kind of restaurants I go to, there's not normally a waiting list.
Yeah, you are a very
Local pizza joint's good for me, and they have a good fish and vegetables, something healthy, and it's not too. It's quite. I'm not really an aficionado of the upscale places. Yeah,
You are very
to me,
true.
$25 a meal is a really good feed. That's what I want.
Let's go back to those unserviced leads. So 200,000 unserviced leads. I remember back when Go Blitz started, right at the start, and it's had a few names, but there were 104,000. The leads have actually doubled. The unserviced leads have doubled. Tell me, where are they geographically, and in which divisions do you have the predominance of those unserviced leads?
Well, they're all over. Less in New Zealand because the economy is pretty pathetically weak over there. It depends more on the division. So there's some divisions that tend to be very over lead. Like one is fencing, probably the extreme. At one stage, we were knocking back 60% of fencing leads. To the extent that we're even starting up our own fencing franchise these days to try and employ people direct to train them and get them going. There's so much work. Dog wash is another one. Most of our dog wash franchises are booked out months ahead. They get busy very quickly. Mowing is pretty strong. And then you go to cleaning, which is not too bad. And then you go to divisions like test and tag, IT, bookkeeping, which really have to go out and push a lot to get work. So it's sort of an extreme from fencing, dog wash at one end down to IT, bookkeeping at the other.
Okay. And so are you actively chasing franchisees? And of course you are, but I mean, what are you doing to actively attract new franchisees to service those leads? Because the customer dissatisfaction, even though they aren't a client of Jim's because they're not getting their lead service, that may be a genuine problem. What are you doing to get people to service those leads? Are you still pushing the independent contractors angle?
We do actually convert. We have a system where with thing called, you mentioned Go Blitz, we call it Bizzer now, where we actually sell leads to independent contractors.
Yeah.
Quite a few of those actually, when they get the quality of the leads, because our leads it's not like High Pages where you get 5 people going for a lead cheapest price. Yeah. We only give it to one person. So they like the quality of the lead. And when that becomes competitive, we have quite a few come across to Jim's and join us. So that's one of the things that we do. But honestly, and often if they're good operators and they're well established, we just grant them a franchise because there is so much work. But we just simply try to find more franchisees. That's the biggest struggle. We on the whole, no division is really determined by the level of leads. Every division is determined by the ability to attract capable people. So we advertise wherever we can. We have a lot of social media. We do a lot of Facebook boosts, that kind of thing. Obviously, just the normal, Seek and everything else. We just every method possible to try and attract people to the system. And then we have a big social media campaign in general that's very, very effective in introducing people to us.
How many franchisee applicants do you actually reject? Because I remember at training, I saw one person out of an auditorium full of potential applicants. One person decided not to join, but everyone else was just gung-ho for the system. You're still not getting enough in, But how many do you actually reject at the moment? Do you reject any?
Oh, yes, yes, but not at the stage of training. We occasionally knock back a person for training. For example, we had one of the things I'll always ask the staff at the conference center is anybody being rude or difficult? That's a really bad sign. Or we had one particular person who was made improper advances towards female staff. I mean, just so you look for that sort of thing. But generally, the screening is done earlier. But for example, if you've got somebody who comes up and it's clear that the mother or the father is buying a job for their early 20s son who can't find a job, that's a sort of a complete red flag. But franchisors will do that quite early in the process. We also put them out on the road too. We get an opinion of them from the franchisees who are there with trainers and say, are they good? Do they have a good attitude? Do they listen? Do they learn?
Okay, so it's done in advance of training. So let's just go back to some of those divisions that you mentioned. You've been in the media a little bit recently with some disgruntled divisions or some challenges with dog wash and handyman. How's that going? I mean, I know you've come to an arrangement with the franchisees in dog wash, but what's happening with that? Can you talk about those two divisions?
First of all, yes, there's a genuine issue in that the person who is selling the franchises for dog wash, we have a system in dog wash where we own the trailers and we basically assign them as part of the deal. And then they can sell, including the right to it, but they don't own the trailers. Now, what we discovered is that the person who was selling the franchises for dog wash was telling people they would come to own the trailer, which is an obvious lie. And it's completely not so in any of our documentation. It's in a contract, disclosure, everything. It's all clear that we own them. But she told them that. So we said, look, we have to accept that she was saying that. There was no written evidence, but we had to accept it. I was told, legally speaking, they had no case. But morally speaking, they had a case. So what I said to them is, okay, here's your two options. First of all, if you truly believe the trailer should be yours, would be yours, we'll give it to you. Okay, we'll pass it across to you. All you're going to do is to pay $5,000 for us to waive restraint of trade, because it's normally because they want to go independent to do it. Yeah. And if we've been paying for the trailer's upkeep on the basis that it was ours, you have to pay us back that. So once they paid that back, then we just assigned the trailer to them. And the other option was people who wanted to keep on, we just say, look, as an apology, we'll give you 6 months free, which is worth about, $5,000, no fees. And if you ever want to sell, we won't take any resale commission, which is about 20%. So that will save about another $10,000, $15,000. So about equal numbers have accepted those two.
Oh, okay. So you had like a 50-50 sort of take up and did 50% exit? What was the lot?
Yeah, a few of them have gone. We've dropped about 50 in that division. We had about 270, then about 220 at last. Yeah. But we're signing new people, so I don't think it's going to go much beyond that. Look, it was a terrible situation. I think the articles themselves that was a genuine issue and it had to be faced. And I think we did a fair enough thing about it. You can't really claim that. I mean, if it's going to be yours anyway, well, then we've treated it as if it was yours. Yeah. The articles themselves were, the thing about it is what this journalist did is she looks at franchisees who are doing poorly and said, oh, misery, it's so bad, can't pay my fees. What you got to think about that is the fact that some franchisees will fail. We know that. Something like 9% of franchisees, based on their polling, report poor income. About 50% good, the rest is satisfactory, okay. Now, you can point to those ones and you can say, hey, there's some real sad cases there. But the point of it is if that had gone to business any other way, would they have been better off? Well, figures show that, for example, of people who go into independent business of any kind, like service business, like cleaning, mowing, those kind of things, between 90 and 95% will be gone in the first year. They don't last. These are easily available figures. Now, our figure is like 12%. The chance of making good income, if you go into it by yourself, is much, much lower. If you go into any other franchise system in Australia, I'll be absolutely confident that anybody else does far worse than us. And we know that because we've had one particular guy go to one of our competitors, thinking of it as franchisor, got such terrible service, he decided to come back and bring in one of the other franchises with him. But we know we do better than independents. We know better than any of our competitors by far. So what does the article say except that some people go into business and they'll fail, even with the best support possible?
Is there no saving that bottom 9%? I know you have, great peer and buddy systems. Is there no saving those? Are they just beyond redemption in terms of being able to make money?
We don't give up easily. Well, for a start, the 9% can be short term. A person can be start up and have a bit of struggle and then do better later on. So it's not permanent. We don't give up easily. We really try. But some people just shouldn't be in business. And with all the screening we can possibly do, somebody asked me once the question: if you had a superpower, what would you like to be able to do? Would you like to be able to fly like Superman or run like the Streak or have X-ray vision and see through walls? What superpower would you like? And I say, one superpower, I'd like to look at somebody and know whether they're going to be successful as a franchisee. Yeah. If I had that superpower, I would be fantastically happy. You just don't know.
You don't know.
You look at a person and they interview well and they seem to have all the right enthusiasm and energy and stuff. And how can you tell? They trial on the field well. How can you tell? But then when they're out there, the typical, it's not so much that they're stupid or anything. The biggest problem is people who when something goes wrong, a good operator will say, okay, something's gone wrong. Say, here's a difficult client or unhappy client. What could I do to make it better? How could I have changed it? What can I learn from that experience? I mean, I've had unhappy, as a mine contractor, I had unhappy clients at times, but not often. And I would look to what can I do? Now, another kind of operator will say, no, it's the client's fault. The client made a mistake, or it's Jim's fault, or the complaint system is unfair. You look at anything, you blame somebody else, so you don't change yourself. That is, it's what we call a lead franchisee. Gold is the ones that are really great, they're always going for initiative. They're the ones that are going to end up, making millions of dollars, this kind of stuff. Then there's your bronze, which are people who will listen, and then there's your leads who just won't listen. And that's the characteristic. The other problem you have too, which is increasing a problem these days, is mental health issues. You get people who get shattered. You'll get a very good operator, like a guy, and he's great work ethic and he's organized, and then his wife dumps him.
Yeah.
And he falls apart. So
personal issues causing those mental health issues. And I know certainly during COVID there were quite a few of those, and you're on record speaking about that. And I think you've even got a program, or you certainly introduced a program back then to support the mental health of your franchisees. Is that still going?
Oh, yes. We had a terrible case a few years back where one of our franchisees in WA went berserk. He killed his wife and his little girls, and
very sad. Yeah,
very sad. And we just said, this is the number one crisis that we face. Yeah. We, in the whole history of Jim's Crew, in nearly 40 years, we've had one person die on the job, but we've had multiple people commit suicide. That is the biggest danger. So what we've done is we give them a fridge magnet thing that goes on their fridge with all the emergency numbers. Yep. The franchisors, including myself, I might say, are trained in how to cope with mental health emergency. It's part of our training program now. We have a system of mentoring where franchisees volunteer without charge to talk to anybody who needs to, and that's all on the website. And we also have a paid counselling service, which is qualified psychologists who are there without any charge at all to any franchisee has any kind of issue. So we really try. And we obviously we stress a lot meetings. You've got to be part of a community. The biggest people are too cut off these days. So come to meetings and things like, I know it sounds petty, but if you run a meeting and you give people a meal, it makes it attractive and it makes it more communal. Yeah. So we really try these days to have a system where there's a meal provided with the meeting so people can come in and form part of a brotherhood or sisterhood, so they get to know each other and they can support each other in hard times. All the causes we support as gyms are all related to that. Like we raise money for men's sheds. We've raised quite a few thousand for men's sheds, Beyond Blue, those kinds of organizations, particularly mental health for men, because we see it all the time. And we come across it so often. It's so tragic. But what do you do?
Let's just go back to that other disgruntled division, which was handyman, if I remember correctly. What's the situation with that division at the moment? Are you working through the negotiations?
Oh, I think what you mean is construction.
Oh, construction. Apologies. Yeah, because they were looking at handyman's, remit, and they wanted to, encroach upon handyman.
Well, not so much that actually. what what happened was we had a bit of a dispute with this guy about the whole way things were done, and we're headed towards a mediation session,
Yeah.
and he decided that he would have a stronger point if he made a big fuss with the media. So he rang up this journalist and said, "Hey, we're suing Jim's for $2.9 million."
Yeah.
Okay, big headline, Jim's is in trouble. And people were talking to me and saying, "Hey, you're a bust." And I said, "There's absolutely no issue." We went, had a mediation session. We had a professional mediator there. Within 1 hour, we came up with a quite amicable solution. It was just a beat up. This guy thought, but I mean, he didn't do himself any good because the other franchisors all loathe him now. This is a guy who goes out of his way to blacken the company. He had no.
So he's still a franchisor?
Yeah, of course. You can't terminate a person for being a so and so, can you?
Yeah. Yeah. No, okay. Fair. Cool. Well, let's quickly move on to the franchising. Actually, let's talk about the franchisee survey. Now, if I'm correct in my assumption, you're the first franchisor to publicly release the anonymous results of your entire group. Is that correct?
Yes.
I couldn't find any other research about this. Now,
we had that done by, our own surveys are internal.
Yeah.
We really try to get about 90%, and we ring them, but they're all internal.
Yeah.
The one we had done was commissioned by an external body.
Yeah, that's right.
They only got about 30%. So they were slightly more negative. I think they showed about 15% with poor income versus our 9%, because the people who responded were more like those who were negative.
Yeah.
We're the only company in the world that's ever done that, as far as I know. But this is the thing I've said to governments for years when they go on about the franchising code. Their idea is, let's have a more and more detailed and legalistic disclosure document. Now, the problem with that is that nobody reads the disclosure document.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And I've asked franchisees at training, I said, has anybody read the entire disclosure document? Not one person puts up their hand. Yeah. So it's basically legalistic garbage. It means nothing. Yeah. What I said in every inquiry always is, what you need to do is to have a virtual independent body poll every franchisee every year and publicly display the results. And that would do so much for franchising. Not just the fact that the contract is fair, but it is a support good. Are they nice to you? Would you do it again? Simple questions like that. Okay. So I got so frustrated. Eventually I said, we'll do it ourselves. We'll be an example. We'll put our own stuff out there. Now, I've got to admit, Barry, this is not entirely unselfish, because I know perfectly well that if we were compared against any other franchise system, especially in the service area, we would kill them, because our franchisee satisfaction is so much better. So it's very much in our interest. But at the same time, I think it's ethically right too, because if a franchisor treats franchisees badly and then that's displayed, and people say things like, never deal with this guy again, reality does not live up to the promise, they don't keep their promises, you see this and see this, that would really kill the bad operators. Disclosures do nothing. They're pathetic.
In fact, well, the Treasury has just closed the submission for the licensing scheme that's being bandied around at the moment, and they've just released the Franchising Code of Conduct 2024. One of our suggestions back to Treasury, because we made submissions against the code and then for the licensing scheme, one of our submissions was, in fact, do exactly what you've done, very transparent but anonymous, franchisee satisfaction survey. That is the way in disclosure processes to define if the franchisor and the franchise system is any good. If the franchisees are happy, then you'll know that usually that's related to profitability and, general, lifestyle and work-life balance, etc. Let's just quickly talk about the Franchising Code of Conduct. Have you seen the latest release from Treasury? What do you think about the licensing regime they're proposing? Any thoughts on that?
Oh, I think it's garbage, basically. I really do. Look, there are some aspects which are good. One of them is that a franchisor has to give a list of current franchisees and partners.
Yeah.
I like that one. I've been doing that since 1989. We made a
Yeah.
practice of that. And it's one of the reasons we were successful, because we could use our list to sell it. So that's a very good, I think, having a certain amount of time to cooling off period after you have to see the contract for a couple of weeks. That's all very positive and stuff.
Yeah.
So there's some good things about it. But the overall disclosure itself is garbage because nobody reads it. I know even lawyers don't understand that disclosure document. I've had them say, this is so dense and legalistic, we don't understand it. All it does is give them a veneer of respectability without actually doing anything to protect anybody. The trouble is, you basically put the criminals in charge of the prison. You've got the people who are being regulated deciding. You get people like the Franchisee Association Australia, which, as far as I'm concerned, is a nothing group. I mean, I have nothing to do with them. I've got no respect for them. They've got no standards at all. They get involved in these things, and they set it up in such a way to make sure that nobody, no franchisors are going to be hurt by it in any way. I can see what's going on. It's a bit like having the drug companies decide the drugs like they do in America.
Yeah.
The drug companies decide what drugs should be sold and at what price and stuff. I mean, that's just terrible.
So are you talking about the Franchise Council or the Franchisee Association?
No, the Franchise Council of Australia, the FCA. Yeah. The franchisees are different. I get on well with those guys. We're on the same team, and they don't have any respect for this code either.
It's really interesting. The proposal for the new disclosure document, there were 5 key areas. There was the removal of the fact sheet, integration of some aspects of the Fair Work. There was more detail around franchisee contacts. So that list of franchisees, you're talking about capturing all of their details, not just a physical address. Significant capital expenditure, the timing and the amounts required during the term of the franchise agreement. And the last one was the replacement of the marketing fund with the new name of the specific purpose fund. So, there's various funds now, they're all lumped into specific purpose funds. So some of those I think are good in terms of, having the actual contact details of franchisees available. I think that's great. The capital expenditure, I think that's great. But they've also gone over and above now, Treasury, and they've spoken about a licensing scheme for franchisors. You need a license to be a franchisor. What do you think of that?
Well, licensing schemes are generally a terrible idea. What they tend to do is actually favour big companies like ours, honestly. They favour the incumbents. They make it difficult for new people to come through. So it's anti-competitive. They've done studies in America where they actually have different licensing regimes for different professions, like even cosmetics and this kind of stuff, stupid things. Some states will have them and some don't. And there's a very, very distinct, if you have a licensing system in place, you're going to have 2 things happen consistently. First of all, you're going to get higher prices. And secondly, you're going to get worse service. So licensing as such is a terrible idea. Franchisors ought to be held responsible, not by some bureaucratic nightmare thing to go through. We can handle it well. We've got in-house lawyers, for heaven's sake. It's easy for us. But it's very anti-competitive. Franchisors need to be held responsible for the service they give their franchisees. How do we give great customer service at gyms? The best thing we've ever done is we record complaints, and then we survey customers and we feed that back. We ask the customers, are they happy? And then you look at the people. Most of our people do very well. We look at those who don't, and we put a lot of pressure on them to do better. And as we've done that, the actual lead volume has driven dramatically. That's franchising is the same thing. Basically, you should ask the franchisees. There's no other substitute. Look, some things are sensible, like, for example, marketing. Now, the marketing should be separate. You can't put marketing for franchisees in the same basket as marketing for clients, because marketing for clients is for the franchisee's benefit. Yeah. So that is sensible, and it's sensible to be audited. There are some things in it which do make reasonable sense. They just don't go nearly far enough. There are some really nasty, exploitative people out there. They can go through all the legal negotiations and they can still give a lousy service. It really makes me angry. We've got a legal service, Jim's Legal now, which we're starting to do quite well. But one of the things I'd really like to do is to represent franchisees against rip-off franchisors.
Yeah, well, there's a little bit of that going on in industry, which we won't talk about at the moment. But I just want to come back to that licensing scheme. The licensing scheme, I think you're right. It's a grab for cash in my mind, because you're going to have to pay for a license. That favors the larger franchisors with legal teams like yourselves that can fend off any sort of claims, and it disfavors the smaller startups. But I actually see the franchising industry as broader than just the franchisors and franchisees. There are the consultants that help set up, franchise systems. There are the lawyers in the middle that help with franchise agreements. And I think you mentioned something about lawyers earlier, not understanding disclosure documents. But I actually think that a lot of the lawyers in industry, and I'll be criticized for this comment, but they don't actually understand the practical, strategic, commercial implications of some of the decisions, or even some of the legalese that are in some of these documents. So
no, they don't. They don't, Barry. You're quite right. I had one particular case where a lawyer knocked back a franchise. He said, so the guy said, okay, his friend draws or whatever it is, you give me an opinion. He says, don't sign it. Now, we said, why was that? Why did you say that? What's wrong with the contract? Oh, no, I'm just against franchising in general. I say that to every franchise. Yeah. So you paid basically $300 or $400 or $500 to somebody to tell you that when the title itself is all they need. It's a franchise, so don't sign it. The fact is, most lawyers don't understand franchising, as you say. What should happen? It's a gold mine for lawyers, but most of them are incompetent. They don't understand don't know what a good contract. What they should do is have a generic franchise, a lawyer, somebody who really understands franchising, actually do. Every franchisor should submit their contract to this party, this person, and they should do a really thorough but brief explanation of what it is, how good it is, how it compares. I'm talking about 1 or 2 pages.
Yeah.
And that should be given to every prospective franchisee. So instead of going to see some lawyer and spending hundreds of dollars for somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, you have one competent person actually saying, this is a good contract, but it's got these problems.
Yeah. Who's the best franchising lawyer you've ever worked with, and what are the attributes of that particular lawyer?
There's a guy called Stephen something we used to have something to do with through the FCA, which was pretty good. I don't have much contact with them, seriously, Benny, but look, the thing about lawyers is this: it's an interesting profession. It has a very bad name. People are always told, there's always jokes. I know I'm personally about 10 jokes about lawyers. Most of them are quite good, but my experience is that lawyers are almost schizophrenic. You've got some lawyers who are the best and most decent and most ethical people you could possibly imagine. Really caring, ethical, will do everything they can. And then you've got other lawyers who are the worst scumbags imaginable that will rip people off blind. We had one particular case where there was a session where a franchisee had a genuine case for against the franchisor for getting their franchise fees back, which is about $35,000. All right. We actually said to them, we will help you to recover this. We think you've got a very strong case. The lawyer said, no, don't do that. You've got to go gyms. So they actually launched a legal suit against the franchisor against us. And eventually it's settled at mediation. The franchisee got $40,000. Okay. But the legal bills charged by the lawyer was $100,000. Whereas a halfway ethical lawyer would have looked at it and said, here's the national franchisor wanting to support you. Why don't you get them to push a deal through? Because we've got leverage on the franchisor. We could make them do it. It would have cost them maybe $2,000 or $3,000 to do it right. There's been $100,000.
Yeah.
And that's tragic. And you know why it's even worse? Because the franchisee had actually died, and it was their husband who was trying to get the money, the widower, to try and support his family. But this lawyer ripped them off blind. This didn't go to court. This settled at the first mediation. The first. And it settled in about 2 hours.
So he fundamentally stole their watch and told them the time.
It was a shocker. I can remember that. I was actually on mobile phone. It was up in Cairns or somewhere, and I was doing it. It wasn't a hard case. They had a very strong case, but the lawyer was just. I was just shocked and appalled when I heard that. How can any human being do that to a struggling family? To charge them $100,000 for a case that hadn't even there's not even a formal submission to the court.
Yeah.
And they must have known that they had no real prospect of getting that kind of money back.
Yeah. Yeah. It's woeful. It's woeful. And I think, as you say, lawyers that don't necessarily understand the franchising system or the legal arrangements, they're the worst because they're ignorant and unethical in this case. Let's just quickly talk about new franchisors. Let's assume we've got clients who have a great corporate business. They're looking at expanding through franchising. What would your advice be to someone who's already got a great corporate business? Maybe they're struggling to manage the HR of multi-site, stores or mobile units, vans and what have you. Maybe they don't have the funds to expand nationally through their own sort of stores or vans, and they're looking at franchising. What would your advice be to them?
Okay, first of all, I don't think starting from a corporate basis is the right way to franchise in any case. I would think it's better for the sole operator. Our top people have actually come from the tools.
Yeah.
Like a lot of them come from the clean division. People like Bill Cobbin-Ogle came out of cleaning. So he's now doing laundry, which has been a great division. It's got like 170 franchisees in about 4 years. It's been brilliant. Or Lance Azapati, who's one of our mowing franchisees who started driving school. Well, people who've run a small business, one-person business. We had a guy he was working for Mr. Antennas as a franchisee, paying them half his salary, came across, bought Jim's franchise, Jim's Antennas, and later sold it for like $3 million, and he's now a multi-millionaire. I mean, this is a guy who was actually installing antennas. That was his trade. So that's the people we look for, somebody who's actually doing the job and understands it. And that's virtually all of our divisions start out that way. So I wouldn't start with corporate. Look, if a person wants to franchise a business, first thing I would say to them is come to us and see what you're doing as a Jim's division. We don't actually charge much up front. It's just like the first 6 months fees in advance. So you can actually come in with very little. We will thoroughly train you, put through all of our courses, franchisor training courses. We'll show you how to do logos and set up your websites and everything. There's quite a process to it. So we can show people how to do it. I'd even say, even if you want to do it independently, come and do all of our training. We'll train you. It'll cost you, $2,000 or $3,000, and you can go and do it by yourself.
Go and do it by yourself.
Yeah, we don't bind people. There's no contract. There's no non-disclosure. We've actually had 2 people that I know of that actually went through our full training course and then went off and tried to launch their own.
Amazing. Do you use many consultants at all? I know you've never really done that, but these days with the sort of vast increase in your unserviced leads, in the growth of your franchisees, the need to kind of get more divisions on board and more franchisees on board, what sort of use do you have for consultants, or if at all?
Oh, we do. For example, we had problems with our accounts finance department. So we actually got some external consultants to come in and look through the whole way we did things. And they found quite a few red flags. So we changed those. It cost us about $120,000. Other times we had problems with IT. We'll bring outside experts in to have a look at it, say what we need to do, what systems we need. So we use consultants at times for those kinds of things. More silly stuff. Not so much about franchising itself, because we're pretty good at that. But more about the legal issues, finance, IT, those kinds of areas.
Last question, Jim. What's next on the cards? Your 50 divisions. Is that correct still?
It's probably a bit less actually now. If a division doesn't work well, we tend to let it die. We had pet patrol at one stage, for example, which we just couldn't find enough work. That's things like walking dogs and picking up food and stuff like this. So it didn't work. So we actually arranged for the franchisees to get transferred to dog wash or cleaning or something. Yeah. So we'll shut a division down if we can't. We often transfer people between divisions. So if something's not working, okay, what about doing something different instead? And we just transfer them across.
So you're near 50 divisions. What's next? I mean, is there any segment that you want to franchise, but you just haven't been able to?
We'd love to be more in the medical area. Yeah. We're talking to people about doctors, that kind of thing, health. I'm very keen on health. So we'd love to do things like health consultants or personal trainers, or not site-based, but more service-based, or locum doctors to build in their homes, that sort of thing. But anything in that area, like hearing tests and so forth, or eyes, or anything, those kinds of areas, we'd love to be in that area. I'm a passion for health. I'm really very keen on being healthy, exercise and good diet and stuff. Actually, one of the most exciting things we're doing right now is a thing called Jim's Healthy, where we're actually getting packaged food for delivery to supermarkets and also independently or through vending machines. And I'm not much of a cook myself. My wife is wonderful, but she cooks very hard. So I like packaged food, but you go to the supermarket or wherever and different services, and they don't meet my standards. So we're actually developing a line of packaged food, which is 4.5 stars minimum, the health rating out of 5, and also has 2.5 serves of vegetables in every pack. Because the recommendation is you get 5 serves of veggies a day and 2 of fruit. That's your diet. Something like 7% of Australians actually have that as a diet. So I'd like to produce a food that I would want to live off myself. Tasty food that really meets full health guidelines. And that's going to be launched early next year. That's really exciting stuff.
Wow, that's about to be launched next year. And that's a division?
Well, it's actually run by National Office.
Oh, okay. I see.
We've got a company in Western Australia that works that does it all. They're the ones that do the packaging. A lot of these ones for Woolworths and Coles.
Yeah,
got them doing. There's a lot of legalism about it. You've got to get it's very carefully controlled. I mean, the health rating system's good actually. It's one of the few things the government do that I really approve of.
Yeah.
So that's exciting actually, because health is a really big thing. I so many people suffer from poor health, and it makes them miserable, and it makes them sick, and it makes them die early.
Yeah. Well, actually, there was another question I wanted to ask before we close. Biohistory. Is there going to be another update of biohistory in the near future?
What we're actually doing is producing a book. It's called The Baby Bust, which is about collapsing fertility. Around what's happened to it, what's gone wrong, and how to fix it. And I've got a solution based on epigenetics, based on the science. We're running a research program now, which is looking for a way of changing character in a way that helps people to live happier and healthier lives, which would include things like having a more, sustainable birth rate. So that's very exciting. It's actually changing as we're developing ideas. It's actually changing. A lot of what's in biohistory is now obsolete. Like, for example, I talked about things like testosterone. We've now come to understand it's more like dopamine receptors and so forth. So we're doing a whole lot of experiments early next year, which we're looking at these kinds of things, the effect of food restriction and so forth on dopamine receptors, the way that the brain responds to dopamine. It's a fascinating topic, and there's a lot of really good research going. It's actually, we've got to the stage where the science is now sufficiently advanced that cures become quite feasible. Like CRISPR has advanced so fast. It's a precise tool to edit epigenetics and genetic the genes, so that you can make precise changes to what's going on. So you should actually be able to solve these kinds of issues, and a whole lot of mental health and other issues too, with the better understanding. And technology is getting really close to the stage where you can effectively use CRISPR to make very targeted changes.
And are you going to publish that research next year?
Yes.
Excellent.
We're doing a whole lot of, my research team's done about 20 or 30 papers, I don't even numbers so far, but there's a lot going on in the next 6 months. We're just doing some very, very big studies and systematic studies. I mean, I've got more money than I had in the past. When I started 10 years ago, I only had about $250,000 a year. We're now spending well over $3 million a year on the research project. So we've got some really exciting things going on. So within the next 6 months, the book itself is being written, but it won't be released until late next year, because we really want to find all these research findings in first.
Excellent. Exciting 2025 ahead for Jim's.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's great. So Jim's Healthy, did you call it?
Jim's
That's
Healthy.
being launched?
Yes.
We've got the research coming through.
Yep.
Maybe some new divisions in medical.
We'd love to have them. It's having the right person to deal with them. You've got to have the right person in charge. But we're talking to people about these things.
Well, Jim, it's been great talking to you. I've really, really enjoyed catching up again. You're going to be, I'm sure, in the news in the not too distant future. You're always in and out of the news, so I'll keep my eye out for you. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I've got to say thank you for sharing your time.
Thanks, Barry. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you. Cheers, Jim.
Thank you for listening to the episode of the Gyms podcast. If you want to learn more about the Gyms Group, head to gyms.net or call us on 131 546 Australia or 0800 454 654 New Zealand. And if you did like the episode as well, please make sure you leave a review or a comment or a thumbs up or a comment on the video as well. We appreciate your support. And until next episode, we hope you have a great week.